The black sedan pulled up to the towering iron gates of the mansion that once belonged to him. Daniel Richardson's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, staring at the house where his world had collapsed 6 years ago. The same house where police had dragged him away in handcuffs, accused of murdering his beloved wife Sarah. But what happened next would shake him to his core. As Daniel stepped out of the car, a small voice pierced through the afternoon silence. "Daddy, Daddy, you came back." A 5-year-old boy with dark curly hair came running toward him, tears streaming down his face. Daniel froze. This child was calling him Daddy, but Daniel had never seen him before in his life. The boy threw his tiny arms around Daniel's legs, sobbing with pure joy. "I knew you would come back for me, Daddy. I waited every single day." Daniel's mind went blank. Who was this child? And why was he calling him father? But wait, let me tell you where this incredible story began, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Comment below where you're watching from, and let's dive into this unbelievable tale. 6 years earlier, Daniel Richardson was living the perfect life. At 32, he was one of the youngest millionaires in the city, having built a successful tech company from nothing. His wife Sarah was the love of his life, a beautiful, kind woman who worked as a pediatric nurse at the local children's hospital. They lived in a sprawling mansion in the hills, complete with manicured gardens and a staff of 3. Among their staff was Maria Santos, a quiet woman in her early 30s who worked as their housekeeper. Maria was a single mother from Mexico who had come to America seeking a better life. She was hardworking, honest, and Sarah had grown quite fond of her. Sarah often said that Maria wasn't just their employee, she was family. Daniel trusted Maria completely. She had been with them for 3 years, and Sarah would often spend hours talking with her in the kitchen, sharing stories and laughs. Maria's English was still developing, but her warm heart spoke louder than any words could. The other staff members were Robert, the elderly gardener who had worked for the previous owners, and Janet, the cook who came in 3 days a week. It was a peaceful household, filled with love and contentment. But Daniel's perfect world was about to crumble in the most devastating way possible. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in October when everything changed. Daniel had been working late at his office downtown, finalizing a major deal that would expand his company internationally. He remembered checking his phone around 9 p.m. and seeing a text from Sarah. "Working late shift at hospital. Love you. See you tomorrow morning." Daniel smiled at the message and continued working until nearly midnight. When he finally arrived home, the house was dark and quiet. He assumed Sarah was still at the hospital. She often worked double shifts when the children's ward was understaffed. The next morning, Daniel woke up alone. This wasn't unusual. Sarah's nursing schedule was unpredictable, and she sometimes stayed overnight at the hospital during emergencies. He showered, dressed, and headed to the kitchen for coffee. That's where he found Maria, sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Maria, what's wrong?" Daniel asked, immediately concerned. Maria looked up at him, her hands shaking. "Senor Daniel, I don't know how to say this. Just tell me what happened," Daniel said, sitting down across from her. "Last night, after you left for work, Senora Sarah came home early. She said she wasn't feeling well and wanted to rest. I made her some tea and helped her to bed around 8 o'clock. Daniel nodded, listening carefully. "Okay, so where is she now?" Maria's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I don't know, senor. This morning, when I came to work, I went to check on her. The bedroom door was locked from the inside. I knocked and knocked, but no answer. I used the spare key you gave me, and..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Her whole body was trembling. "And what, Maria? Where is my wife?" "She's gone, senor." The bed was empty. The window was open. There was blood on the sheets. Daniel's world tilted. "Blood? What do you mean blood?" "Not much, but I saw it. Dark spots on the white sheets, and her jewelry box was open, some pieces missing. But senor, the strangest thing..." "What?" "All her clothes are still in the closet. Her purse is still on the dresser. Even her car keys are where she always leaves them." Daniel's mind raced. This made no sense. If Sarah had left voluntarily, why would she leave without any belongings? And the blood, what did that mean? He rushed upstairs to their bedroom, Maria following behind him. The room looked exactly as Maria had described. The bed was unmade, dark stains visible on the white sheets. The antique jewelry box Sarah had inherited from her grandmother was open, with several expensive pieces missing. But Daniel noticed something else that made his blood run cold. Sarah's wedding ring was sitting on the nightstand, next to a glass of water that was only half empty. Sarah never took off her wedding ring. Never. Maria, did Sarah seem upset about anything yesterday? Was she acting strange? Maria shook her head. No, senor. She seemed normal. Maybe a little tired from work, but normal. She even asked me to make extra dinner because she thought you might be hungry when you came home late. Daniel pulled out his phone and called Sarah's cell. It went straight to voicemail. He tried the hospital, but they told him Sarah hadn't been scheduled to work the previous night. In fact, she had called in sick for her shift. The knot in Daniel's stomach grew tighter. Sarah had lied to him about working late. But why? For the next 2 hours, Daniel called everyone they knew. Sarah's sister hadn't heard from her. Her best friend from nursing school was surprised to learn Sarah was missing. Her parents, who lived in another state, were frantic when Daniel told them what had happened. Finally, Daniel made the call he dreaded most. He called the police. Detective Raymond Foster arrived at the mansion within an hour, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and a forensics team. Foster was a tall, thin man in his 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of a room at once. Mr. Richardson, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened, Foster said, pulling out a notepad. Daniel repeated everything he had told Maria earlier about working late, coming home to an empty house, and finding the bedroom in disarray the next morning. And you last spoke to your wife when? Foster asked. Yesterday around 6 p.m., when I was leaving for work. She said she was going to the hospital for a late shift. But the hospital says she called in sick. Daniel's heart sank. I didn't know that. She texted me later saying she was working late. Foster made a note. Can I see that text? Daniel showed him the phone. Foster studied the message carefully, then handed the phone to one of the forensics officers. Mr. Richardson, I need to ask you some personal questions. Was your marriage happy? Any problems between you and your wife? No, absolutely not. We were very happy. We were even talking about starting a family soon. Any financial troubles? None. My business is doing very well. What about other men? Do you have any reason to believe your wife might have been seeing someone else? Daniel felt anger flare in his chest. Detective, my wife was not having an affair. She loved me and I loved her. Something terrible has happened to her. And instead of looking for her, you're treating me like a suspect. Foster's expression remained neutral. Mr. Richardson, in cases like this, we have to consider all possibilities. The husband is always our first person of interest, simply because statistics show that when a wife disappears under suspicious circumstances, the husband is involved more often than not. Well, I'm not involved. I want my wife found safely, and I want whoever did this to her caught. The forensics team spent the entire day going through the house. They photographed everything, collected the blood-stained sheets, dusted for fingerprints, and interviewed the staff. When they questioned Maria, Daniel noticed she seemed nervous and kept glancing at him with an odd expression he couldn't read. But he didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone was shaken up by Sarah's disappearance. Robert, the gardener, told police he hadn't seen anything unusual. He typically left by 5 p.m. and hadn't been on the property the night Sarah vanished. Janet, the cook, hadn't worked that day at all. By evening, the police had found very little evidence. The blood on the sheets was confirmed to be Sarah's, but the amount was small, not enough to indicate serious injury or death. There were no signs of forced entry into the house. No fingerprints other than those belonging to Daniel, Sarah, and the household staff. Mr. Richardson, Detective Foster said as the team was packing up, we're treating this as a missing person case for now, but I want you to know that you shouldn't leave town. We may have more questions. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty house, looking at photos of him and Sarah, touching things that belonged to her, trying to make sense of what had happened. Where was she? Who had taken her? And why? The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews, search teams, and media attention. The story of the missing millionaire's wife quickly became front-page news. Daniel appeared on television, pleading for information about Sarah's whereabouts. He offered a $100,000 reward for any information leading to her safe return. But as the days turned into weeks with no sign of Sarah, Detective Foster's questions became more pointed and accusatory. "Mr. Richardson, we've been looking into your finances. Your company took out a large insurance policy on your wife 6 months ago. Care to explain that?" Daniel was shocked. "What insurance policy? I didn't take out any policy on Sarah. It's a $2 million life insurance policy. Your signature is on the documents." Daniel stared at the papers Foster showed him. It was indeed his signature, but he had no memory of signing any such document. "Detective, I swear to you, I don't remember signing this. Maybe it was part of some corporate paperwork I signed without reading carefully. My lawyers handle most of the insurance stuff for the company." $2 million is a lot of money, Mr. Richardson, even for someone as wealthy as you. "I don't need the money, detective. I make more than that in a good month. And even if I did need money, I would never hurt Sarah. I love her more than my own life." But Daniel could see that Foster didn't believe him. The detective's whole demeanor had changed. He was no longer looking for Sarah. He was building a case against Daniel. Things got worse when the police discovered that Daniel had been having financial problems with his company that he hadn't told anyone about. A major client had defaulted on a contract, leaving Daniel's company in a precarious position. The $2 million insurance payout would indeed solve his immediate financial crisis. "You lied to us about your finances, Mr. Richardson," Foster said during another interrogation. "Your company is in serious trouble. You needed money fast." "Yes, the company had some cash flow problems, but they were temporary. I would never kill my wife for money. This is insane." "Is it? You stage your wife's disappearance, collect the insurance money, and start fresh. Maybe you didn't mean for her to die. Maybe things got out of hand." "I didn't stage anything. Someone took my wife, and instead of finding her, you're wasting time trying to pin this on me." But the evidence kept mounting against Daniel. The police found that Sarah's cell phone had been turned off permanently the night she disappeared, and the last ping from the tower showed it was in the area of their house. They found traces of Sarah's DNA in Daniel's car, which he explained by saying they often rode together, but Foster seemed to think it was more sinister. Most damning of all, 3 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, her body was found in a remote wooded area about 50 miles from their home. She had died from blunt force trauma to the head, and the medical examiner estimated she had been dead for approximately 3 weeks, meaning she was killed the same night she vanished. Daniel was devastated. The love of his life was dead, and somehow everyone seemed to think he was responsible. The arrest came on a cold November morning. Daniel was in his office trying to keep his failing company afloat when Detective Foster walked in with 2 uniformed officers. "Daniel Richardson, you are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Richardson. You have the right to remain silent." The trial was a media circus. Every day, Daniel sat in the courtroom listening to the prosecution paint him as a greedy husband who killed his wife for insurance money. They presented a timeline showing that Daniel had opportunity. He claimed to be at his office, but security cameras showed him leaving the building at 7 p.m., giving him time to get home before Sarah was killed. They showed motive, the insurance policy, and his company's financial troubles. They even presented evidence suggesting that Daniel had been researching divorce lawyers online, though Daniel swore he had never done any such research. The defense argued that Daniel was being framed, that someone else had killed Sarah and made it look like Daniel was responsible. But they couldn't prove who that someone might be, and the evidence against Daniel was overwhelming. Maria testified for the prosecution. She told the court about finding the bloody sheets and Sarah's missing jewelry. But when Daniel's lawyer cross-examined her, something strange happened. "Ms. Santos, you said you came to work that morning and found Mrs. Richardson missing. What time did you arrive at the house?" "Around 7 in the morning, like always." And you have a key to the house? Yes, Senor Daniel gave me a key so I could come and go as needed. Did you ever enter the house when the Richardsons weren't home? Maria hesitated. Sometimes, if I needed to clean or do laundry. Miss Santos, isn't it true that you were in love with Mr. Richardson? The courtroom erupted. Maria's face turned bright red, and she began crying. No, that is not true. Isn't it true that you hoped Mrs. Richardson would disappear so you could take her place? Objection, the prosecutor shouted. Sustained, the judge replied, but the damage was done. Daniel saw the jury looking at Maria with suspicion. For a moment, he felt hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would believe he was innocent. But that hope was crushed when the prosecution presented their final piece of evidence. A witness who claimed to have seen Daniel's car in the area where Sarah's body was found on the night she died. The witness was an elderly man named Harold Webb, who lived in a cabin near the woods where Sarah was discovered. He testified that he had seen a black sedan matching Daniel's car parked on the side of the road around 11 p.m. the night Sarah vanished. I remember because it was unusual to see such an expensive car in that area. And when I saw the news about the murder, I recognized the car immediately. Daniel's lawyer tried to poke holes in Webb's testimony, pointing out that it had been dark and rainy that night, and that many cars looked similar. But Webb was adamant about what he had seen. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, Daniel stood as the foreman read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Richardson, guilty of murder in the first degree. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. He looked back at the packed courtroom and saw Maria in the third row, tears streaming down her face. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Daniel saw something in her expression that he couldn't quite identify. Guilt? Fear? Sadness? The judge sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, Daniel shouted back to the courtroom, "I didn't kill my wife. Someone in this room knows the truth. Someone in this room knows what really happened to Sarah." But no one came forward. No one spoke up. Daniel was taken to Millbrook State Penitentiary, where he would spend the next 6 years of his life. In prison, Daniel never gave up hope that somehow, someday, the truth would come out. He spent every free moment in the law library, studying legal precedents and filing appeal after appeal. He hired private investigators to re-examine the evidence. He wrote letters to journalists, hoping someone would take an interest in his case. But year after year, his appeals were denied. The private investigators found nothing new. The journalists moved on to other stories. Daniel's company collapsed without him there to run it. His mansion was sold to pay legal fees and debts. His friends abandoned him, believing he was guilty. Even Sarah's family turned against him, convinced he had murdered their beloved daughter. The only person who visited Daniel in prison was his elderly Aunt Ruth, his father's sister who had helped raise him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. Aunt Ruth was in her 70s now, but she never missed a monthly visit. "I know you didn't do this, Danny," she would tell him every time she came. "I raised you, and I know what kind of man you are. You could never hurt Sarah." "Then why can't I prove it, Aunt Ruth? Why does all the evidence point to me?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but I believe the truth always comes out eventually. You just have to be patient." During his 4th year in prison, Daniel received devastating news. Aunt Ruth had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was the last person in the world who believed in his innocence, and now she was gone. Daniel fell into a deep depression. He stopped filing appeals. He stopped writing letters. He stopped hoping. But in his 6th year, something incredible happened. A new inmate arrived at Millbrook, a man named Carlos Mendez who had been convicted of armed robbery. Carlos was Maria's cousin, and he had information that would change everything. "You Daniel Richardson?" Carlos asked one day in the prison yard. "Yeah, why?" "My cousin Maria. She worked for you, right? Before you got arrested." Daniel's heart began to race. "Yes, she was our housekeeper." "What about her?" Carlos looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer to Daniel. "Man, she's been eating herself alive with guilt. She told me what really happened that night. She told me the truth. What truth? You didn't kill your wife, man. Maria knows who did. And she knows why. Daniel grabbed Carlos by the shirt. Tell me everything. Right now. Carlos shook his head. Not here. Too many ears. But I can tell you this much: Maria's got a son now. A little boy. And Daniel. That little boy thinks you're his father. Daniel's mind reeled. A son? How was that possible? I don't understand. How can her son think I'm his father? Because Maria told him you were. She's been showing him pictures of you for 5 years. Telling him stories about his daddy who had to go away but would come back someday. Carlos, this doesn't make sense. I never had a relationship with Maria. I was faithful to my wife. Carlos studied Daniel's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that's true, which makes this whole thing even crazier. Maria's been living in some kind of fantasy, man. But here's the thing. She knows what happened to your wife, and she's finally ready to talk. She wants to meet with you. How? I'm in prison. She's been working with some lawyer trying to get new evidence presented or something. I don't understand all the legal stuff, but she told me to tell you that if I ever met you in here, she's sorry. She's so sorry. That night, Daniel lay awake in his cell, his mind spinning. Maria had a son who thought Daniel was his father. Maria knew what really happened to Sarah. Maria was sorry. What did it all mean? 2 weeks later, Daniel received a letter from an attorney he had never heard of. A woman named Jennifer Hayes who specialized in wrongful conviction cases. Mr. Richardson, the letter read, I have been contacted by Maria Santos regarding your case. She has information that may lead to your exoneration. I would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. Daniel could barely contain his excitement as he wrote back to Jennifer Hayes, agreeing to meet with her as soon as possible. The meeting took place in the prison's attorney conference room. Jennifer Hayes was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a determined expression. Mr. Richardson, I want you to know that I've reviewed your case file, and I believe you may have been wrongfully convicted. Maria Santos came to me 6 months ago with information about the night your wife died. She's been struggling with guilt ever since your trial, and she finally decided she couldn't live with the secret anymore. What secret? Maria saw who killed your wife. She witnessed the entire thing. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. She saw the murder? Then why didn't she tell the police? Why did she let me go to prison for 6 years? Jennifer's expression was grim. Because the person who killed your wife threatened to kill her and her unborn child if she ever told anyone what she saw. Unborn child? Maria was pregnant at the time of the murder, though she didn't know it yet. She discovered she was pregnant a few weeks after your arrest. The father of the child is the same man who killed your wife. Daniel felt like the room was spinning. Who? Who killed Sarah? Detective Raymond Foster. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. The detective who had investigated Sarah's death, who had built the case against Daniel, who had seemed so convinced of Daniel's guilt. He was the real killer. That's impossible. Why would Detective Foster kill my wife? Because Sarah had discovered that Foster was involved in a drug trafficking operation, using his position as a police detective to protect certain dealers and shipments. Sarah had treated one of Foster's victims in the emergency room, a young woman who had been beaten nearly to death by Foster when she threatened to expose him. Jennifer pulled out a folder full of documents. The woman, whose name was Crystal Martinez, managed to tell Sarah what Foster had done before she died from her injuries. Sarah was going to report Foster to Internal Affairs the next day. Foster found out about it and decided to eliminate the threat. But how does Maria fit into all of this? Foster had been having an affair with Maria for several months before the murder. He had promised to leave his wife and marry her. Maria was completely infatuated with him. And when he told her that Sarah was trying to ruin his career with false accusations, Maria believed him. Daniel felt sick. So Maria helped him kill my wife? Not exactly. Foster told Maria he was just going to talk to Sarah, to convince her not to file the report. He asked Maria to let him into the house that night after you left for work. Maria gave him the spare key you had given her. And then, According to Maria, she waited in her car down the street while Foster went inside to talk to Sarah. But when Foster came out an hour later, he was covered in blood. He told Maria that Sarah had attacked him and he had defended himself, but that Sarah was dead. Jennifer paused, letting the weight of the information sink in. Foster threatened to frame Maria for the murder if she ever told anyone what she knew. He said he would make it look like Maria had killed Sarah out of jealousy, and that no one would believe the word of an illegal immigrant over a police detective. But Maria wasn't illegal. She had a work visa. Foster didn't know that. He assumed she was undocumented because she was nervous around police and spoke with an accent. Maria was too frightened to correct him. Daniel's head was spinning. So Foster killed Sarah, framed me, and threatened Maria to keep quiet. Exactly, and it gets worse. Foster helped plant evidence against you. He's the one who forged your signature on the insurance documents. He had access to samples of your handwriting from the police reports you signed. He also planted Sarah's DNA in your car by transferring blood from the crime scene. What about the witness who said he saw my car near where Sarah's body was found? Jennifer smiled grimly. Harold Webb is Foster's cousin. Foster paid him to lie on the witness stand. Daniel couldn't speak for several minutes. The scope of Foster's betrayal was breathtaking. The man who was supposed to find Sarah's killer had actually murdered her himself, then systematically destroyed Daniel's life to cover up his crime. Jennifer, why is Maria coming forward now? What changed? Two things. First, Foster was killed in a drug deal gone bad 3 months ago. With him dead, Maria no longer fears for her life or her son's safety. Her son. Yes, Foster's son. The little boy who Maria has been telling is your child. She's been showing him photos of you for 5 years, telling him that his daddy is away but will come home someday. In her mind, she convinced herself that she was protecting the boy from knowing his real father was a corrupt cop and murderer. Daniel felt a wave of emotion he couldn't quite identify. Somewhere out there was a 5-year-old boy who believed Daniel was his father, who had been waiting for years for Daniel to come home. What's the second thing that changed? Maria's son has been asking more and more questions about why his daddy doesn't visit, why he can't call him, why all the other kids at school have daddies who come to their soccer games. Maria realized she couldn't keep lying to him forever, and she couldn't bear the thought of telling him the truth about Foster. Jennifer leaned forward in her chair. Daniel, Maria wants to make this right. She's prepared to testify to everything I've told you. She has evidence photos Foster took of himself with your wife's jewelry, text messages between her and Foster from the night of the murder, even the bloody clothes Foster wore that night that he made her hide for him. She kept the bloody clothes? Foster told her to dispose of them, but Maria was so terrified that she hid them instead, thinking they might protect her somehow if Foster ever tried to blame her for the murder. They're in a storage unit that she's been paying for all these years. Daniel felt hope blooming in his chest for the first time in 6 years. What happens now? Now we file a motion to have your conviction overturned based on new evidence. With Maria's testimony and the physical evidence she's preserved, I'm confident we can prove your innocence and get you released. How long will it take? These things usually take months or even years, but given the overwhelming nature of the evidence, I think we can expedite the process. I'm hoping to have you out of here within 6 to 8 weeks. Daniel could barely believe what he was hearing. After 6 years of hopelessness, he might actually be free. Jennifer, I need to ask you something. When I get out, Maria's son, Daniel, I can't tell you what to do about the boy. Maria has created an incredibly complex situation by telling him you're his father. The child loves you and believes you love him. But I want you to understand that you have no legal obligation to him whatsoever. What's his name? His name is Miguel. He just turned 5 years old last month. Daniel closed his eyes, trying to imagine what it would be like to meet this child who thought he was his father. What do you say to a 5-year-old who has been waiting years for you to come home, when you've never even met him before? Does he look like Foster? Actually, no. Maria showed me photos. He looks remarkably like you, which is part of what made her fantasy seem believable to herself. They have similar dark hair and brown eyes. From a distance, people might actually believe you were related. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel. The child of his wife's killer looked like him, and the woman who had helped destroy his life had convinced herself that he was the father of her son. Jennifer, when you file the motion, I want Maria to know something. Tell her that I forgive her. What she did was wrong, but I understand she was scared and manipulated. And tell her that I'll do whatever is best for Miguel when I get out. I won't abandon him because of the mistakes adults made. Jennifer smiled for the first time since the meeting began. I think that's very generous of you, Daniel. I'll make sure she knows. As Jennifer packed up her files and prepared to leave, she turned back to Daniel. There's one more thing you should know. Your Aunt Ruth left you everything in her will. She never believed you were guilty, and she wanted to make sure you had something to start over with when you got out. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to get you back on your feet. Daniel felt tears welling up in his eyes. Aunt Ruth had believed in him until the very end, and even in death, she was still taking care of him. The next 6 weeks passed slowly for Daniel, but Jennifer was true to her word. The evidence Maria provided was overwhelming, and once the district attorney's office reviewed it, they agreed that Daniel's conviction should be overturned. On a warm spring morning, Daniel walked out of Millbrook State Penitentiary a free man. Jennifer was waiting for him with a car and a bag of clothes that actually fit. "How does it feel?" she asked as they drove away from the prison. "Surreal," Daniel admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this is all a dream." "It's not a dream. You're free, and your name has been cleared. The state has even agreed to a compensation package for the wrongful conviction." "What about Maria and Miguel?" "They're waiting for you at Maria's apartment. She's been trying to prepare Miguel for this day, but he's so excited he can barely contain himself." Daniel's stomach churned with nervousness. "Jennifer, I have no idea how to handle this situation. What if I disappoint him? What if I can't live up to what he's been imagining all these years?" "Daniel, that little boy has been dreaming about meeting his daddy for 5 years. Just being there, just showing up will mean everything to him. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be kind." They pulled up to a modest apartment building in a working-class neighborhood. Maria's apartment was on the 2nd floor, and Daniel could hear children playing in the courtyard below. "Are you ready?" Jennifer asked. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. They climbed the stairs to apartment 2B. Jennifer knocked on the door, and a moment later, it opened to reveal Maria Santos. She looked older than Daniel remembered, with lines of worry around her eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. But when she saw Daniel, her face crumpled with emotion. "Senor Daniel, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I did to you." Daniel looked at this woman who had helped destroy his life, who had stayed silent while he spent 6 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He felt anger, yes, but also pity. She had been a victim too, in her own way. "Maria, we all made mistakes. What matters now is that the truth came out." Maria stepped aside to let them in, and Daniel found himself in a small but clean living room filled with children's toys and photographs. And there, on the mantel, was a picture of Daniel from his wedding day, displayed prominently like a shrine. "Miguel is in his room," Maria said nervously. "He's been so excited since I told him you were coming. But Senor Daniel, I need you to know, he doesn't understand about prison or courts or any of that. I told him you were away working, and that someday you would come home to him. What does he know about what happened to my wife?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "He knows nothing. He's too young. I plan to tell him the truth when he's older, but for now, let's just focus on him," Daniel said. Maria called down the hallway. "Miguel, your daddy is here." Daniel heard the thunder of small feet running down the hall, and then suddenly, there he was. Miguel Santos was indeed a beautiful child, with dark curly hair and large brown eyes that sparkled with joy and innocence. He was small for his age, but sturdy, and when he saw Daniel, his face lit up with the purest happiness Daniel had ever seen. "Daddy!" Miguel shouted, launching himself into Daniel's arms. The impact of the child's embrace nearly knocked Daniel over, both physically and emotionally. This little boy, who didn't even know him, loved him completely and unconditionally. Miguel wrapped his tiny arms around Daniel's neck and held on like he would never let go. "I knew you would come back," Miguel said, his voice muffled against Daniel's shoulder. "I told everyone at school that my daddy would come back for me, and they said he wouldn't, but I knew he would." Daniel looked over Miguel's head at Maria, who was crying silently in the doorway. This was the moment he had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. But as he held this precious child in his arms, Daniel felt something unexpected wash over him. It wasn't obligation or duty or even pity. It was love. Pure, protective, overwhelming love for this little boy who had been waiting so patiently for a father who had never even known he existed. "I'm here now, Miguel," Daniel said softly, stroking the child's hair. "I'm here now." And in that moment, Daniel realized that while he had lost everything 6 years ago, his wife, his freedom, his fortune, his reputation, he might have found something too, a son. But just as Daniel was beginning to process this incredible turn of events, Miguel pulled back from the embrace and looked at him with those trusting brown eyes. "Daddy, why do you look so different from your pictures? And why are your hands so rough? And why?" Miguel's innocent questions were interrupted by a loud knock at the apartment door. Maria's face went pale with fear. "I'm not expecting anyone," she whispered. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Through the peephole, Maria saw 2 men in dark suits. Her blood run cold. "Police!" came a voice from the other side of the door. "We need to speak with Maria Santos and Daniel Richardson immediately." Daniel felt Miguel tense in his arms. The little boy looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy, why are the police here? Are you going to have to go away again?" The innocent question pierced Daniel's heart. He had just been reunited with this child who believed he was his father, and now it seemed like they might be separated again before their relationship had even begun. Maria opened the door slowly, her hands shaking. The 2 men flashed their badges. "I'm Detective James Murphy, and this is Detective Lisa Chun from Internal Affairs. We're investigating the Raymond Foster case." Daniel's stomach dropped. Foster was dead, but apparently his crimes were still being investigated. "Mr. Richardson," Detective Murphy said, "we know you were just released from prison today. We're not here to arrest anyone, but we need to ask you and Ms. Santos some questions about Detective Foster's activities." "Can this wait?" Daniel asked, still holding Miguel. "I just got out of prison today, and this child." "Daddy, you were in prison?" Miguel's voice was small and confused. "What's prison?" Maria quickly knelt down beside Miguel. "Mijo, why don't you go play in your room while the adults talk?" "But I don't want Daddy to leave again." Daniel's heart broke at the panic in Miguel's voice. He knelt down to the child's eye level. "Miguel, I promise I'm not going anywhere. These people just need to ask me some questions, and then we'll spend the rest of the day together. Okay? You promise?" "I promise." Miguel studied Daniel's face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly and went to his room. The detective sat down in Maria's small living room, and Daniel noticed them taking in the shrine of photos featuring him on the mantle. "Ms. Santos," Detective Chun began, "we understand you've provided testimony that led to Mr. Richardson's release. We're here because we've discovered that Detective Foster's corruption went much deeper than just your case." She pulled out a thick file folder. "Foster was involved with a drug trafficking ring that operated for over 8 years. We've identified at least 12 other cases where Foster may have planted evidence, intimidated witnesses, or outright framed innocent people to protect his criminal associates." Daniel felt sick. 12 other people like me? Possibly more. Foster was very careful to choose victims who wouldn't be believed immigrants, people with criminal records, anyone society might easily dismiss. You were different because you were wealthy and prominent, but Foster was confident he could make the evidence against you so overwhelming that no one would question it. Detective Murphy leaned forward. "Mr. Richardson, we're going to need you to testify in several of these cases. Your story, combined with Ms. Santos's evidence, will be crucial in overturning other wrongful convictions." "Of course, I'll do whatever I can to help." "There's something else," Detective Chun said, glancing at Maria. We found Foster's personal files, including detailed notes about his relationship with Ms. Santos and his obsession with your wife. Obsession. Foster had been watching your wife for months before he killed her. He had photos of her at the hospital, at the grocery store, even at your home. He seemed to believe that if he eliminated her, Ms. Santos would be free to pursue a relationship with him. Maria gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. I never knew. He never told me. Ms. Santos, Foster used you. He made you believe you were in love with him. But really, he was using you to get access to your employer's home and information about their routines. Daniel looked at Maria with new understanding. She hadn't just been a woman who made a terrible mistake. She had been manipulated and victimized by a master criminal. There's more, Detective Murphy continued. We found evidence that Foster was planning to kill you too, Ms. Santos, after Mr. Richardson's trial was over. He couldn't risk you eventually coming forward with the truth. Maria began crying. He said he loved me. He said we would be together after everything was resolved. He was lying. We found a detailed plan in his files for staging your death to look like a suicide brought on by guilt over testifying against Mr. Richardson. Daniel reached out and took Maria's hand. Maria, I'm so sorry. You were as much a victim in this as I was. The questioning continued for 2 more hours. The detectives explained that Foster's criminal network was still being dismantled, and that several other corrupt officers had been arrested. The investigation would likely continue for months or even years. Finally, the detectives packed up their files and prepared to leave. Mr. Richardson will be in touch about the other cases. And Ms. Santos, we want you to know that you did the right thing by coming forward. Your courage is going to help a lot of innocent people get justice. After they left, Daniel and Maria sat in stunned silence for several minutes. I can't believe how much I didn't know, Maria finally said. All this time, I thought Foster really loved me. I thought I was protecting myself and my baby by staying quiet. But he would have killed us anyway. Maria, you can't blame yourself for believing someone who was expertly manipulating you. Foster fooled a lot of people, judges, juries, other cops. You were just trying to survive. Miguel appeared in the doorway, still looking worried. Is everything okay? Are the police gone? Daniel opened his arms, and Miguel ran to him. Everything is fine, little man. The police were just asking some questions about some bad things that happened a long time ago. But it's all over now. And you're not going away again? No, I'm not going away again. Miguel smiled and snuggled against Daniel's chest. Good. I have so many things to show you. I can read now and I can ride a bike. And I know all the names of the dinosaurs. Despite everything he had been through, Daniel found himself smiling. This child's enthusiasm was infectious. I would love to see all of those things. But first, I think we should talk about some important stuff. What kind of stuff? Daniel looked at Maria, who nodded encouragingly. Miguel, you know how you've been living here with your mom and I've been away? Yes, because you had to work far away, right? Well, the thing is, now I'm back, but I don't have a house anymore. I'm going to need to find a new place to live. Miguel's face fell. You mean you're not going to live here with me and Mama? Daniel's heart clenched. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that the entire foundation of his understanding of family is built on a lie? Well, that's something your Mama and I need to talk about. But no matter what happens, I want you to know that I care about you very much, and I'm going to be part of your life from now on. But you're my daddy. Daddies are supposed to live with their kids. Maria knelt down beside them. Mijo, sometimes families are different from what we see on TV or at your friends' houses. Sometimes daddies live in different places but still love their children very much. Like Tommy's dad? He lives in an apartment, but he picks Tommy up every weekend. Yes, exactly like that, Daniel said, relieved that Miguel had a reference point he could understand. So you'll pick me up every weekend? If that's okay with your mom, then yes, I'd love to spend weekends with you. Miguel seemed to consider this arrangement, then nodded. Okay, but can we start this weekend? I want to show you the park where I play soccer. This weekend sounds perfect. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel found himself amazed by Miguel's bright personality and endless energy. The child showed him drawings he had made, books he could read, and told him elaborate stories about his imaginary adventures. But Daniel also noticed signs of the confusion and longing Miguel had been carrying. The little boy would sometimes stop mid-sentence and just stare at Daniel, as if he couldn't quite believe he was really there. He asked questions like, "Do you remember when I was a baby? And why didn't you ever call me on the phone?" That broke Daniel's heart. Around dinner time, Jennifer Hayes arrived to check on how the reunion was going. "How are you holding up?" she asked Daniel privately while Miguel was helping Maria set the table. "It's overwhelming," Daniel admitted. "That little boy loves me completely, and I barely know him. But Jennifer, I can already feel myself caring about him. Is that crazy?" "Not at all. You've been through a traumatic experience, and now you're being offered a chance to build something positive from the wreckage. There's nothing wrong with opening your heart to a child who needs you. But I keep thinking about Sarah. Would she have wanted this? Would she have understood?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Daniel, your wife was a pediatric nurse. She dedicated her life to caring for children. From everything I've learned about her, I think she would want you to love and protect this little boy, regardless of how complicated the situation is." That evening, after Jennifer left and Miguel had gone to bed, Daniel and Maria sat in the kitchen talking long into the night. "I need you to understand something," Daniel told her. "I'm not Miguel's father, and we both know that. But that little boy has been waiting for me for 5 years, and I'm not going to abandon him because of the circumstances of his birth." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you'll let me, I want to be a real father figure in Miguel's life. Not because I have to, but because I want to. He deserves to have someone who loves him and shows up for him." Maria began crying again. "Daniel, after everything I did to you, why would you do this?" "Because Miguel is innocent in all of this. And because I think maybe this is supposed to happen. Maybe losing everything I thought I wanted has led me to something I never knew I needed. What about when he's older and asks questions about why you were away? About his real father? We'll tell him the truth in age-appropriate ways. We'll tell him that his real father was a very troubled man who made bad choices, but that he has a dad who chose to love him and be there for him." Maria nodded through her tears. "I want to make this right, Daniel. I want to be a good mother to Miguel, and I want to help you build a relationship with him. Then that's what we'll do." As Daniel finally prepared to leave that night, he was staying in a hotel until he could find an apartment. Miguel appeared in his pajamas. "Daddy, are you leaving now?" "Just for tonight, buddy. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll spend the whole day together. Promise. Promise." Miguel hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy." The words hit Daniel like a physical force. This child, who had never received anything from him but a few hours of attention, loved him unconditionally and completely. "I love you too, Miguel." And as Daniel said the words, he realized they were true. Somehow, in the span of a single day, this little boy had worked his way into Daniel's heart completely. But as Daniel walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. The police investigation into Foster's crimes was ongoing, and Daniel couldn't help but worry about what other secrets might come to light. Little did he know that the biggest shock was yet to come. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and don't miss part 2, where the most jaw-dropping revelation will leave you speechless.